Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on our programme this week, a dangerous escalation over the northwestern Idlib province as Turkish and Syrian forces continue to battle it out. Meanwhile, a humanitarian crisis is unfolding in the region. Uncertainty looms as Iraq's Prime Minister-designate withdraws his candidacy. We take a look at the country's Jewish community in exile and their hopes for the protest movement. Also coming up, GDP figures out of Egypt are strong following reforms launched in 2016, but many in the country don't feel that growth is trickling down. Thank you for watching Middle East Matters. We start with the ongoing conflict in the region between Syria's government forces and Turkey-backed rebels in Idlib. Fighting in the northwestern province escalated in recent days as Ankara stepped up military operations to counter advances by Syria. This is an area that's home to some 3 million people, half of whom came from other parts of Syria after being displaced by violence during the 9-year civil war, and they're on the run again. Meanwhile, thousands of migrants are also flooding Turkey's border with Greece after Ankara announced that it will no longer stop them from attempting to cross by land or sea. Turning our attention to Iraq, where Mohammed Alawi withdrew his candidacy for the post of Prime Minister over the weekend. This amid a massive anti-government protest movement and political infighting. The announcement comes after lawmakers for a second time failed to approve his cabinet of ministers, threatening an unprecedented power vacuum on the country. Now, Iraq's youth remain unshaken. Here's a report from Delana D'Souza.
Standing with pride in an abandoned building on Baghdad's Tahrir Square. The site has been a protester stronghold since people started taking to the streets of Iraq in October 2019. Hundreds have lost their lives in the country since the protest movement began. The demonstrations have so far failed to make changes in the way Iraq's governed, yet despite this, many young people remain undeterred.
The political goals of the movement weren't clear, but it's achieved a lot on a social level. It's achieved a social cohesion between the two genders. Now men and women are gathering and working together.
Many in Iraq have been dreaming of a society that's less conservative. The protest movement has so far helped spur that by erasing divisions between genders, classes, and religious groups.
We have achieved social cohesion and a real intellectual revolution. That is considered a great victory, in addition to the political changes that will be seen in the coming periods.
Across Iraq, people spend hours debating what kind of society they want to create. They've been questioning Iraq's sectarian constitution and even neighboring Iran's influence in the country.
Many women, girls and even the elderly helped the protesters during this sit-in. The protest changed me a lot, as it made me personally stronger and made us know right from wrong.
For the people gathered here, the effects of the protest movement are irreversible. It's even changed the way they view themselves.
Linda Menuhin Abdelaziz was 20 years old when her father was kidnapped in Baghdad in 1970. 3 decades later, in search of answers, she made a documentary, Shadow in Baghdad, while shining a spotlight on the persecution of the Iraqi Jewish community, which has now become her lifelong mission. Today, Linda is a moderator for a number of Arabic-language social media platforms run by Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, bringing together and giving a voice to the Jewish community across the region. Linda, thank you so much for being with us. Now, just moments ago, we heard a report about the ongoing protest movement in Iraq, something that's being watched very closely by the exiled Iraqi Jewish community. Tell us about that.
Well, I think due to the digital media, nowadays there is a very dynamic relationship between Israelis from Jew who have lived in Iraq as Jews and run away, and the next generation with Iraqis who are living now in Iraq. Nowadays, they feel that they are closer than ever because after the demise of Saddam Hussein, they know now that all the lies that they were told were not true about Jews. So now there is great expectations in Iraq that there come one day when the Jews will be back to rebuild Iraq.
So there is hope that they'll be able to go back to the country. And as I mentioned earlier, you yourself have had a very personal encounter with this persecution. You were forced to flee Iraq and, of course, lost your father under Saddam Hussein's reign of terror.
Right. But, you know, after all these years, I learned, first of all, you know, to build bridges with Iraqis, because the majority of the population have suffered under the regime of Saddam Hussein, and they are still suffering nowadays. They haven't learned really the lesson, unfortunately. So in spite of the fact I say that I'm not an engineer, but I build bridges between people, and I would like really to help with whatever I can. The Iraqis that I'm in touch with them, be it in my official position with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or on a personal level. And I called upon Iraqis, young Iraqis who hold foreign passports to come to Israel and enjoy a trip with the Jews from Iraqi origin. I think this is really a major change and a very interesting bridge between the youth also.
Now, Linda, I'd like to zoom out a little, if I can. Unfortunately, the experiences of persecution that we've been speaking about aren't limited to Iraq. We're talking about this minority community that doesn't necessarily feel safe in a number of countries in the Middle East. If you can talk to us very briefly about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, unfortunately, you know, with the establishment of the country of Israel in 1948, there was an exchange of populations. So the Arab League, you know, actually contributed a lot in the exodus of around 850,000 Jews from Arab countries and Muslim countries. So the people only don't know that they were refugees actually from Arab countries. All these Jews have lost their property there, and they have been displaced, and they came practically with nothing. 600,000 of them came and were absorbed in Israel. But on the other side, we see that, you know, people know about the Palestinian refugees who were at that time 670,000, even less than the Jews in Arab countries. We have to bear in mind that, you know, the Jews in Arab countries didn't only lose their property, they lost their money, and they have difficult time as much as the Palestinians have here. So I hope that once, you know, truth is being told also in the United Nations, where unfortunately there are more than 150 resolutions adopted by the United Nations only for Palestinians, and unfortunately for the refugees from Jewish countries, not even one single resolution has been adopted.
Linda Menuhin Abdelaziz, working to build a bridge for the Jewish community. Of course, they're also talking about the plight of Palestinians. A senior consultant vis-a-vis the Arab world in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for being with us here on Middle East Matters. Now, Egypt's economic reform programme, launched at the end of 2016, has begun to bear fruit in the form of financial growth and lower inflation. But while the macroeconomic indicators are back in the black, the population isn't feeling the effects. In reality, they're feeling poorer. Now, 1 in every 3 Egyptians lives just above the poverty line. As a consequence, the rate of microcredit lending has grown, with women the principal beneficiaries. Here's a report from our team on the ground.
Salah has achieved her dream, setting up her own business selling fruit and vegetables. She's opened a small shop in a busy area of Cairo, thanks to a loan she received from a microcredit lending organisation a few months ago.
I didn't have the money to start a business myself, so I went to see them. First they gave me £1,000, then £6,000. With that, I could buy some vegetables and even pay myself a salary.
Like 80% of the Egyptian population, Salah doesn't have access to a bank account. So when she needed money, she applied to an organisation which only lends to women.
In Egypt, we have more than 3 million Egyptian families that are fully funded by the mothers or the daughters. Studies concluded that when the female's income increases, most of this income goes to the education and the health of the kids, so the standard of living of the whole family improves.
70% of loans in Egypt are given to women, but thousands of them fall victim to predatory businesses, which charge exorbitant rates of interest. In Egypt, citizens can find themselves behind bars for even small unpaid debts, as little as a few dozen euros. This organisation helps people who've been imprisoned get back on their feet. Heba Abdullah spent a year in prison for a debt of 250 euros. When she got married, this young woman needed to obtain credit for a refrigerator and a washing machine. When she got pregnant, she stopped working. Then her nightmare began.
I managed to pay back £3,000, around 150 euros. But after that, I couldn't pay anymore. The shop owner asked me to pay him back, but I'd spent everything I had on my marriage, and then my son Ali was born. One day the police knocked on my door. They kept me in the station for a few days and then transferred me to the prison.
Local NGOs say the number of people imprisoned over unpaid debts may continue to skyrocket as the rate of poverty spiked in Egypt over the last 5 years. They demand changes to the law targeting the loan sharks.
Well, that's it for me and the team. Do stay tuned to France 24. Thank you for watching.